Dr. Quillen was having a wonderful day, which, given the circumstances, was akin to having a wonderful hangover. It was all about perspective. He was in the middle of the latest batch of DNA sequencing, his favorite way to ignore the grim reality of humanity's long-term survival plans. Who wouldn't enjoy playing God in a makeshift monastery lab somewhere in the armpit of the galaxy? The monks had even grown accustomed to the sound of clanging lab equipment mixing with Gregorian chants, a choir of celestial and earthly sins. "Dr. Quillen, you won't believe this," Gregor shouted, barging into the lab like a man late for his own funeral. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of making miracles happen," Quillen replied, not looking up from his screen. He was in the zone, wading through genetic codes like a seasoned diver navigating a sea of mediocrity. "It's the atmospheric readings. Well, they're not right," Gregor insisted, his tone a cocktail of urgency and dread. "Surprise, surprise. The terraforming never works as advertised. Let's see, is it raining acid again? Or did the oxygen levels decide to play hide and seek?" Quillen finally tore his eyes away from his monitor, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. "Neither. It's different," Gregor said, looking like he had just swallowed a cactus whole. "Different how?" Quillen asked with the enthusiasm of someone about to be told his favorite beer was now alcohol-free. "The levels are fluctuating in a way that suggests—" Gregor hesitated, the words lingering in his throat like a bad aftertaste. "Temporal distortion." Quillen blinked twice, wondering if he just misheard or if Gregor was channeling science fiction cliches. "Temporal distortion? Really? What's next? Little green men asking for tea?" "Just come and see," Gregor urged, gesturing dramatically as if he were guiding Quillen to a revelation about the meaning of life. With a reluctant sigh, Quillen rose from his chair, muttering about the inconvenience of saving humanity while it constantly tried to kill itself. He followed Gregor through the labyrinthine paths, corridors lined with relics of faith and wires of foolish ambition. The control room was as comforting as a dentist's office, sterile, cold, and full of unwelcome surprises. Screens flickered with numbers that resembled an accountant's nightmare. The main display showed the atmospheric conditions of the planet below their supposed salvation from Earth's self-inflicted doom. "See. Right there," Gregor pointed, his finger hovering over a particularly angry-looking red graph. Quillen squinted, as if doing so might turn the data into something less unsettling. "Yep, that's not right. It's like the planet's developed a taste for chaos." "It's not just chaos, Dr. Quillen. These are temporal anomalies. Something's messing with time." "Wonderful," Quillen said with a laugh that had given up on humor and was now just desperate. "I always wanted to find out what happened yesterday today." "It gets worse," Gregor added, his expression suggesting he'd prefer to be anywhere else, preferably far, far away. "Of course it does," Quillen replied, rolling his eyes. "Why stop at just ruining one day? Let's make a week out of it." "There's been a signal detected," Gregor said, lowering his voice as if the walls might eavesdrop and start gossiping. "A signal? You mean like please help, we've screwed up our planet and need a lift kind of signal?" "No," Gregor said, checking the screen again before continuing. "It's alien." Quillen gave him a look that could have melted steel. "Aliens now." "Come on, Gregor, next you'll be telling me we're caught in a bad sci-fi writer's fever dream." "I'm serious. The signal's unlike anything we've ever seen, and it's old. Old, like classic rock old or ancient history old. Try Jurassic," Gregor replied, deadpan as a mortician in the middle of a busy season. "All right, I'm intrigued," Quillen admitted, rubbing his temples as if he could massage the absurdity out of his brain. "Let's say you're right and we're dealing with time-traveling aliens. What's our next move?" "We need to figure out what they want. Or what they wanted, I guess," Gregor said, arms crossed like a defiant child refusing to eat his vegetables. "Fantastic. I assume we're also going to solve world hunger and achieve world peace on our lunch break," Quillen retorted. "Probably not," Gregor conceded, a small smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Quillen sighed, resigned to the fact that his day had taken a sharp turn into bizarre territory. "All right, get the team together. Let's see if we can untangle this mess before it turns into a full-blown catastrophe." As they moved to gather the crew, Quillen couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to poke a very ancient, very alien bear. He would have preferred sticking to his cloning projects. At least those had predictable failures. This, however, was a different beast entirely. By the time they all convened in the briefing room, a space that was as inviting as a tax audit, Quillen had already run through a dozen scenarios in his head, none of which ended particularly well. "All right, folks," Quillen began, addressing the ragtag group of scientists who were simultaneously the best and worst humanity had to offer. "We've got a situation. Gregor here thinks we've pissed off some ancient aliens." There were murmurs, followed by laughter, the kind that bubbles up when you know you're in trouble but hope someone else will fix it. "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad," said Leela, the biologist with the perpetual look of someone who's just discovered her cough has gone cold. "You'd think, but then again, life has a way of surprising us with new depths of bad," Quillen replied, his tone as dry as a desert in a drought. "What's the plan then, boss?" asked Deacon, the engineer who had the remarkable skill of making every problem seem twice as complicated. "I'm open to suggestions that don't involve running and screaming," Quillen said, looking at each of them in turn. "How about we send a probe to the source of the signal?" Leela suggested, her voice carrying a hopeful edge. "Sure, let's send a probe and hope it doesn't come back with a "will return in 65 million years" message," Quillen said, crossing his arms. "Or we could try to communicate," Deacon added. "You know, say hi before they decide to obliterate us." "Great idea," Quillen said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "Because introducing ourselves to ancient alien entities has always ended well for humanity. Do we have a better option?" Gregor asked, looking around the room for any sign of sanity. Quillen sighed, rubbing his face as if he could scrub away the impending doom. "All right, let's send a probe. If it gets eaten or worse, we'll know we're in deep trouble." With that bright and cheery thought, the team set about preparing the probe, while Quillen couldn't help but feel like he was arranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Yet, if he'd learned anything from his years of playing God with humanity's genetic future, it was that, when things went sideways, they did so with style. As the probe launched, he watched the tiny blip move across the screen, a minuscule hope in a universe that had long since run out of charity. If they were lucky, it would return with answers. If not, well, at least they'd have a good story to tell, assuming there was anyone left to tell it to. Moments later, the readings began to change. The anomaly was shifting, as if aware of their curiosity. The signal patterns grew more erratic, like a drunk trying to walk a straight line. "It's reacting," Gregor noted, his voice barely a whisper. "Of course it is," Quillen muttered. "Because why wouldn't it? We just poked the universe's biggest bear with the smallest stick we could find." The tension in the room was palpable, a collective breath held in anticipation of the unknown. They waited, eyes glued to the monitor as if wishing could change the outcome. Then the probe sent back its first data packet, a series of incomprehensible symbols and signals, a language that defied understanding. "What the hell is that?" Leela asked, leaning closer as if proximity might grant her clarity. "Looks like the universe's worst attempt at modern art," Deacon commented, squinting at the screen. "Or a language," Gregor added, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "A language," Quillen repeated, his mind racing. "Great. So we're not just dealing with time-traveling aliens, but savvy ones." "What do we do now?" Leela asked, her voice tinged with the sort of excitement that only the prospect of imminent doom could ignite. "We decipher it," Quillen said, as if it were the simplest task in the world. "Because I'd really like to know if they're planning a visit, or if we should start packing our bags." They all knew it wouldn't be easy. But then, nothing worth doing ever was. As they dove into the data trying to unravel the mystery, Quillen couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a bunch of stubborn humans on a distant rock, trying to outthink the universe's oldest secrets. If nothing else, it was going to be one hell of a ride. And just as things couldn't seem any stranger, the anomaly began to pulse, a rhythmic beat that resonated through the station, like a cosmic heartbeat. It was as if something out there was waiting, watching, deciding. "Well," Quillen said, leaning back in his chair, "let's hope they like surprises." The room was silent, each of them lost in their thoughts as they prepared for whatever came next, because whatever it was coming. And Quillen, for all his cynicism, knew one thing for certain. Humanity would face it head-on with all the stubbornness and recklessness they could muster, because that's what they did best. And in the cold, uncaring void of space, that might just be enough. The probe's return was heralded by a cacophony of alarms that sounded like a drunken robot orchestra having a meltdown. Quillen wasn't sure if it was a sign of success or impending doom. Probably both, he mused, heading towards the control room. In the control room, Leela was already fiddling with the data, her expression a mix of excitement and dread. "The probe's back," she announced, like a waitress mentioning the special of the day, except this special could potentially end civilization as they knew it. "Fantastic," Quillen said, sarcasm dripping like honey off a spoon. "I can't wait to see what lovely surprises it brought us." The screen flickered to life, displaying a jumble of symbols that looked like a toddler's art project if toddlers were capable of interstellar communication. "That's interesting," Gregor said, squinting at the screen as if his vision might somehow translate alien into English. "Interesting? That's one word for it," Quillen replied, scratching his chin. "Another might be terrifying." And then, as if on cue, Sister Vexa strolled in with the air of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. She was an anomaly herself, a nun in a makeshift monastery lab, with a mind that could slice through problems like a scalpel through soft tissue. "Ah, the universe's finest mess," she said, glancing at the data. "Looks like I got here just in time, Sister Vexa," Quillen greeted her, his tone a mix of respect and exasperation. "Just when things couldn't get any weirder, they do." "It's a gift," she replied dryly, her eyes scanning the symbols. "These are Ikaru glyphs. They used to be a big deal in the cosmic neighborhood." "They used to be?" Leela asked, her curiosity piqued. "Yes, until they decided time was more of a suggestion than a rule," Vexa explained, as if discussing the weather. "They've been known to dabble with timelines like it's a hobby." "Well, that's just brilliant," Quillen said, throwing his hands in the air. "Not only do we have aliens, but they're time-tinkering aliens. And they're not just tinkering," Vexa continued, her expression darkening. "They're sabotaging." "Sabotaging what?" Deacon asked, leaning over her shoulder to get a better look at the display. "Earth's terraforming efforts," Vexa replied, her voice steady but grim. "The fluctuations in the atmosphere, the anomalies, it's not the planet rebelling. It's the Ikaru messing with time." "Great," Quillen said, slumping into a chair. "So we're not just stuck in a cosmic sitcom, we're the punchline." "It's worse than that," Gregor said, pointing to a section of the data. "If they keep disrupting the timeline, it could lead to catastrophic environmental collapse. We're talking extinction-level events." "Why would they do that?" Leela asked, incredulous. "What do they gain from ruining everything?" "Who knows?" Quillen replied with a shrug. "Maybe they are bored. Or maybe they just really hate Mondays. Or maybe they're trying to teach us a lesson," Vexa suggested, her voice thoughtful. "The Ikaru believe in cosmic balance. They might see humanity's efforts to terraform as upsetting that balance." "Balance?" Deacon laughed, a harsh sound in the tense room. "They think screwing up our planet is balance." "To them, perhaps," Vexa said. "Remember, their perspective on time and reality is different. We might just be ants in their cosmic sandbox." Quillen sighed, rubbing his temples. "So what do we do about it? Because I'm not particularly fond of being an ant." "We need to communicate," Vexa suggested, her eyes locked on Quillen. "We need to make them understand we're not the threat they think we are." "Talking to time-traveling aliens," Quillen said, shaking his head. "That's a first even for us." "Well, considering the alternative," Leela said with a shrug, "what's the worst that could happen? Besides complete and utter destruction, I mean. Quillen couldn't help but chuckle despite the gravity of the situation. "All right," he said, standing up. "Let's see if we can reason with the universe's most stubborn neighbors." As the team set to work on drafting a message to the Ikaru, Quillen pondered the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag group of scientists and a nun, trying to save humanity from cosmic entities with a twisted sense of humor. If irony were a resource, they'd be billionaires by now. "All right," Quillen said, turning to the group. "Let's put our heads together and come up with something that says don't destroy us in Ikaru." "Sure," Deacon muttered. "Let's just ask them nicely not to erase us from time. I'm sure that'll go over well." "Hey, it's either that or start building a time machine," Gregor said, typing furiously at his console. "Right, because that's much easier," Quillen retorted, his words tinged with sarcasm. The team worked through the night, an exercise in futility wrapped in caffeine and dark humor. They drafted messages, debated tactics, and argued over the best way to approach an alien species they'd never met. It was like trying to write a love letter to someone you'd only ever seen in passing at a train station, except this train station was hurtling through time and space. As the hours dragged on, Quillen found himself reflecting on the bizarre twists life had taken. A planet in chaos, aliens playing with timelines, and a team of misfits trying to save the day. It was enough to make anyone question their career choices. "All right," Vexa said, finally breaking the silence. "I've compiled everything into a single message. It's not perfect, but it's the best we can do." "Good," Quillen said, nodding. "Broadcast it and let's hope the Ikaru are in a listening mood." With a few keystrokes the message was sent, a plea for understanding cast into the cosmic void. They waited, tension thick as the air was heavy with anticipation. Then something happened. The screens flickered and the anomaly's pulse shifted, a rhythmic beat that seemed to respond to their message. "They're reacting," Leela said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or they're laughing at us," Deacon said, his cynicism as sharp as ever. "Let's hope for the former," Quillen replied, eyes glued to the monitors. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for any sign of acknowledgement. Finally, the anomaly stabilized and a new data stream appeared, a response. "They've replied," Gregor announced, his voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Well, what does it say?" Quillen asked, leaning forward with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. It's an invitation," Vexa said, eyes wide with surprise. "They want to meet." Quillen blinked, processing the information. "Meet?" "As in face-to-face." "Exactly," Vexa confirmed. "They've provided coordinates and a time." "Well," Quillen said, leaning back in his chair with a bemused smile, "I guess we're going to be socializing with time-traveling aliens after all." "What's the worst that could happen?" Leela asked, her tone light despite the gravity of the situation. "I can think of a few things," Deacon said, crossing his arms. "But hey, at least it'll make a hell of a story." "Assuming there's anyone left to hear it," Quillen replied, his words a reminder of the stakes. As they prepared for the meeting, Quillen couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to step into the unknown. But for all his cynicism and skepticism, he knew one thing. Humanity had always thrived in the face of adversity, and maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through this cosmic mess. With the coordinates locked in and the team ready, they set off towards the unknown, a journey into the heart of the anomaly. As the ship powered up, Quillen couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, off to negotiate with time-manipulating aliens, armed with nothing but stubbornness and a deep-seated refusal to give up. Just another day in the universe's strangest corner. The journey was uneventful, save for the occasional snarky comment and nervous laughter. They approached the coordinates, tensions high, and were greeted by a sight unlike anything they'd expected. The Ikaru's vessel was a marvel of alien engineering, a structure that seemed to defy logic and physics. It shimmered like a mirage, its surface shifting like the sands of time itself. "Well, that's something you don't see every day," Gregor said, his awe palpable. "Welcome to the Twilight Zone," Deacon added, his humor a mask for his nerves. As they docked, Quillen felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. They were about to step into unknown territory, but for all the risks, there was a strange thrill in the air. "Remember," Vexa said as they prepared to disembark, "we're here to talk, not start a war." "Got it," Quillen replied, taking a deep breath. "Let's hope the Ikaru are in a chatty mood." And with that, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was facing the impossible head-on, with all the reckless abandon and stubbornness they could muster. The universe has a wicked sense of humor, and it seemed to be getting its jollies at the expense of Quillen and his merry band of misfits. Every single attempt to counter the Ikaru's meddling with Earth's terraforming turned into a slapstick routine of cosmic proportions. If failure was an art, they'd be the galaxy's Picassos. Quillen stood in the makeshift monastery lab, the clang of equipment now as comforting as a lullaby. "All right, folks," he said, wiping his brow. "We need to tackle this like a problem we can solve with logic and caffeine." "Great," Gregor muttered, hunched over his console. "Because those have worked wonders so far. Think of this as an opportunity," Sister Vexa offered, her smile as sharp as a guillotine. "A chance to test the limits of human ingenuity and patience." "Or a lesson in futility," Deacon grumbled, crossing his arms. "We're spitballing against a wall of cosmic nonsense." Leela, ever the optimist with a penchant for the absurd, piped up. "Remember, it's not about how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up and pretend you never wanted to be in space in the first place." "Words to live by," Quillen sighed, his faith in the universe's benevolence shrinking to the size of a quark. "Let's try to at least pretend we know what we're doing." They set to work, each member of the team taking a different angle in their increasingly desperate attempt to stabilize the atmospheric readings. The lab buzzed with the chaotic energy of a hive, if that hive was filled with bees trying to outdo each other in sheer incompetence. Sister Vexa attempted to decipher more Ikaru glyphs, her fingers dancing over the console with the precision of a concert pianist on a caffeine bender. "These symbols are meant to be intuitive," she explained, not looking up, "in the same way that jumping off a cliff is meant to be instructional." "Great," Gregor called over. "So, we're basically translating alien hieroglyphs with a Ouija board and hoping for the best." Quillen rubbed his temples, the pressure building like a symphony of migraines. "Gregor, see if you can stabilize the temporal fluctuations. We need to buy some time." "Ironic, given the circumstances," Gregor quipped. "But sure, let me just grab my magic wand." Deacon and Leela were in the control room trying to wrestle the probe's data into something coherent. "Leela, maybe there's a sequence we missed," Deacon suggested. "Something we can use to counter their interference." "Sure, why not?" Leela replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "After all, it's not like the fate of our planet hangs in the balance or anything." Ior's turned into days, and the team's efforts seemed as futile as trying to staple water to a wall. Each plan ended in abject failure, each attempt a reminder of their own insignificance in the face of cosmic chaos. Finally, Quillen called it. "All right, enough of this," he said, slamming his coffee mug onto the table. "Clearly, we're not going to outsmart them with brute force. So what's next?" Vexa asked, her expression one of calm determination. "We need to think like the Ikaru," Quillen said, pacing the small confines of the lab. "Understand their technology at a fundamental level." "Ah, yes," Deacon drawled. "Let's just put on our pointy hats and pretend we're wizards." Quillen shot him a look. "I'm serious. If we can capture one of them or their tech, maybe we can reverse engineer whatever they're using to screw with us." "And how exactly do you propose we catch a time-bending alien?" Gregor asked, skepticism dripping from every word. "With a really big net," Leela suggested, her grin all mischief and madness. "Or a trap," Quillen said, ignoring her. "Something that'll force them to show their hand." Vexa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with an idea. "We need to create a temporal anomaly of our own, something so big it draws them out." "That's risky," Deacon warned. Everything about this is risky, Quillen countered. We're on the brink of an extinction-level event and we're running out of options. So how do we create this anomaly? Gregor asked, a glimmer of excitement in his voice. By pushing the terraforming tech to its limits, Quillen answered. We'll trigger a controlled temporal distortion. Controlled? Deacon raised an eyebrow. I think you mean chaotically experimental. Semantics, Quillen replied with a shrug. But it could work. If nothing else, it'll get their attention. And if it doesn't, Leela asked. Then we're right back where we started, but with more practice at failing spectacularly, Quillen said. The team set to work, transforming the monastery lab into a madhouse of organized chaos. Equipment whirred and beeped, wires snaked across the floor like electric vipers, and the air hummed with anticipation. Okay, people, Quillen said, his voice cutting through the din. Let's make a mess big enough to attract some very unwanted attention. Vexa, Gregor, and Leela tinkered with the terraforming controls, pushing the technology to its brink. The room buzzed with energy, a low hum that resonated in their bones, a symphony of impending disaster. Here goes nothing, Leela said, fingers poised over the control panel. Or everything, Deacon added, leaning against a console with his usual air of casual indifference. The room lit up in a kaleidoscope of colors as the terraforming equipment whirred to life, the screens flickering with data that seemed to defy logic. The team watched in awe and terror as the anomaly formed, a swirling tempest of time and space. Is it supposed to do that? Gregor asked, eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. Nope, Quillen replied, his heart pounding in his chest. But let's hope the Ikaru can't resist such a shiny lure. The air crackled with tension, the anomaly's presence a palpable force that made the hairs on Quillen's neck stand on end. They waited, breathless and anxious, for any sign they'd succeeded in catching the Ikaru's attention. Then, as if on cue, the screens flickered, and a new set of glyphs appeared, more complex and mesmerizing than anything they'd seen before. They're responding, Vexa whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Or they're about to vaporize us, Deacon added helpfully. Stay sharp, Quillen ordered, eyes scanning the readouts. We need to be ready for anything. The glyphs danced across the screens, their patterns hypnotic and entrancing. The team watched, captivated by the alien language that held the key to their survival. Can you decode it? Quillen asked, turning to Vexa. I'm working on it, she replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. But it'll take time. Time we might not have, Gregor muttered, glancing nervously at the anomaly. Minutes dragged by as Vexa worked, the lab silent save for the hum of machinery and the occasional nervous cough. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, a tension that vibrated in the air like a live wire. Then Vexa gasped, her eyes widening in shock. I think I've got it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, don't keep us in suspense, Leela urged, her excitement barely contained. It's a warning, Vexa explained, her gaze locked on the screen. They're telling us to stop the distortion or face the consequences. Consequences, Deacon repeated, his smile sardonic. I love a good vague threat. Quillen's mind raced, considering their options. We can't back down now, he said, his voice firm. We need more information. They're not giving us a choice, Vexa replied. If we push any harder, they might take it as an act of war. Quillen paused, weighing the risks. They were standing on a precipice, the brink of disaster yawning before them, but turning back now would leave them at the mercy of the Ikaru's whims. His decision made, Quillen turned to the team. Keep the distortion going, he ordered. We need to see how far we can push them. You're insane, Gregor said, though there was a gleam of admiration in his eyes. That's why you love me, Quillen shot back, a grin tugging at his lips despite the tension. The anomaly pulsed with energy, a maelstrom of temporal chaos that threatened to consume them all. But still, they held their ground, pushing the limits of their technology and their sanity. Finally, the screens flickered once more, and a new message appeared, the glyphs frantic and insistent. They're offering a meeting, Vexa said, surprise evident in her voice. Again, Leela asked, her brow furrowed. Why would they want to meet after everything? Because, Quillen said, understanding dawning, We've shown them we're not just ants. We're ants with a really big magnifying glass. The team exchanged glances, each weighing the risks and rewards of another encounter with the Ikaru. "Well," Deacon said, breaking the silence, "I guess it's time for round 2 of Let's Not Die in Space." "Let's hope they are in a more cooperative mood," Quillen replied, his resolve steeling as he prepared for what lay ahead. With their course set and their plan in motion, they set off once more into the unknown, a ragtag band of misfits fighting against the odds. They had no guarantees, no promises of success, only the knowledge that they'd done everything they could to stand their ground in the face of overwhelming cosmic forces. And as they powered up the ship, Quillen couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was charging headlong into the impossible, a rebel yell on their lips and a middle finger raised to the universe's indifference. Just another day in the galaxy's most unpredictable sandbox. Quillen stood at the helm of their makeshift ship, which resembled more of a soup can with delusions of grandeur than a sophisticated interstellar vehicle. Still, it was their only ticket to the Ikaru, and with any luck back. The rest of the team occupied various positions around the control room, a jumble of wires, screens, and general disarray. It was the sort of place that had you wondering if the mess was part of a very elaborate plan or just an elaborate mess. The mission: capture an Ikaru or hijack their tech. The catch: said Ikaru could bend time like it was their personal plaything. Somehow, the odds didn't seem stacked in their favor, but when did they ever? "Everyone ready for our dance with destiny," Quillen called, a smirk playing on his lips. "Or, whatever cosmic joke we're about to become the punchline of." Gregor sighed heavily from his console. "I love how ready and not completely screwed are used interchangeably these days." Leela snorted, fingers tapping rapidly across her keyboard. "In this line of work, optimism is the delusion that keeps us sane." Deacon, ever the beacon of positivity, chimed in. "Just remember, kids, being ready and being prepared to die horribly are two entirely different things." Quillen shook his head. "Enough of the pep talk. Let's focus on not getting turned into temporal spaghetti." The ship shuddered as they powered through the disturbance, a visual cacophony of bending light and shifting reality. It was like flying straight into a kaleidoscope powered by existential dread. "Approaching the anomaly," Vexo announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Everyone brace yourselves for the worst. We might actually survive." "There's an uplifting thought," Gregor muttered under his breath, adjusting his seatbelt with the resigned air of a man who'd faced worse odds, though not by much. As they neared the heart of the distortion, the ship's sensors went haywire, throwing out readings that made as much sense as a cat doing calculus. Gregor gave a low whistle, equal parts admiration and terror. "That's some serious cosmic graffiti. Ikaru must be real bored. Or just very, very creative," Leela added, eyes never leaving her screen. "But hey, at least they're keeping busy." "Less talking, more not dying," Quillen ordered, eyes locked on the rapidly fluctuating readings. "Vexa, how's that knowledge of yours coming along?" Vexa turned to face him, a mysterious smile on her lips. I've been holding back a little trick or two." Deacon let out a bark of laughter. "Oh, great. Now's a perfect time to mention you minored in temporal paradoxes." Vexa shrugged, unfazed by the sarcasm. "Figured we should save the best for last. Besides, maybe we can turn this cosmic mess to our advantage." Quillen's interest piqued. "And how exactly do you plan to out-paradox a species that treats time like silly putty?" "By giving them a paradox they can't ignore," Vexer replied cryptically, tapping a series of commands into her console. "If we can create a loop they can't untangle, it might just force them into showing their hand. Or they might just obliterate us to simplify the equation," Gregor pointed out helpfully. "Details," Vexa waved him off, her confidence more unsettling than reassuring. "But it's worth a shot." The ship trembled violently, like a toddler's toy thrown in a tantrum, as the Ikaru signature finally appeared on their screen, a series of enigmatic glyphs twisting into something resembling a response. Looks like we got their attention, Leela noted, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Now what? Now we dance, Quillen said, and with that the plan, or lack thereof, rolled into action. The ship burst into the heart of the Ikaru disturbance, its systems protesting with every groan and shudder. But they were committed now, streaking through the impossible, a mere speck in a storm of cosmic insanity. Hold her steady, Quillen barked, gripping his console like it owed him money. The Ikaru ship materialized in front of them, a sleek, unsettling construct that looked like it belonged in an art gallery dedicated to things best kept at a distance. Gregor whistled low. That's definitely not standard issue, but it doesn't even have a cup holder. Wouldn't matter, Deacon quipped. We're about to be the main course on their menu of cosmic chaos. Vexa was in her element, fingers dancing over the controls with precision. The loop's holding, she reported. Let's see how they like having their own playground used against them. The Ikaru ship responded with a series of gravitational pulses, the ship's hull groaning under the strain. It was like being inside a giant cosmic blender and no one had bothered to add a lid. Our systems are getting scrambled, Leela warned, tapping furiously at her console. Any more of this and we'll be as useful as a solar-powered flashlight in a black hole. Quillen nodded, gritting his teeth. Keep it together. Vexa, any sign they're weakening? Vexa's eyes glinted in the dim light. They're definitely feeling the strain, but stalling them isn't going to last. Then let's make this count, Quillen decided. Get us as close as you can to their core. It's time to see if they are prepared for a little human creativity. Or insanity, Gregor muttered, but he was already adjusting their trajectory. As they closed in, the Ikaru ship unleashed another pulse, reality itself warping and twisting around them. The ship seemed to protest, protesting loudly like a toddler who'd missed nap time. It was a symphony of impending doom, and they were front row center. This is it, Quillen shouted, the excitement and fear blending into a chaotic symphony of adrenaline. On my mark, everyone execute the plan. Plan? Deacon asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought we were winging it. Not quite, Quillen grinned, the madness of their mission reflected in his eyes. We're just improvising with style. They launched into action, each team member executing their role with precision born from countless hours of practice, failure, and the occasional burst of inspiration. The ship dove into a tight spiral, a maneuver that felt more like a death wish than a strategy. The Ikaru seemed to hesitate, their own systems struggling to compensate for the paradox Vexa had unleashed. It was a dance of chaos, a symphony of destruction that hung delicately on the edge of annihilation. Now, Vexa, Quillen yelled, the command cutting through the cacophony. Vexa triggered the final sequence, the ship systems pouring everything into the loop, reality bending and twisting under the strain. The Ikaru ship faltered, its form shimmering as though caught between dimensions. Keep pushing, Quillen urged, his voice a ragged edge of determination. We can't give them a chance to regroup. The Ikaru vessel strained against the loop, the glyphs on their screens flickering madly. It was working, but for how long was anyone's guess? Quillen, we're approaching the limit, Leela warned, her voice tight with tension. If we keep this up, we're going to tear ourselves apart. Just a little longer, Quillen insisted, hope and desperation mingling in equal measure. We're almost there. The ship was a cacophony of alarms and strained metal, a testament to their precarious position. It was a testament to their resilience, their resolve, and their stubborn refusal to go quietly into that dark night. Finally, the Ikaru ship shimmered, its form distorting wildly before stabilizing. The glyphs on their screens shifted, morphing into something new, a symbol of surrender. We did it, Vexa breathed, incredulous. They're backing down. Quillen allowed himself a moment of breathless triumph, the weight of the past few hours lifting ever so slightly. Now let's see if we can negotiate. Negotiate? Gregor asked, incredulous. With what? Our good looks and charm. With the fact that we just outmaneuvered them, Quillen replied, more confident than he felt. And because if there's one thing humanity's good at, it's making an impression. Deacon chuckled, a low, dark sound. Impression or suicidal bluff, I guess we'll find out. With the cosmic storm settling around them, the Ikaru's glyphs formed into a clearer message, an invitation to communicate further. It was a chance, a gamble, but one they couldn't afford to pass up. "Let's have a little chat," Quillen said, steeling himself for the challenge, "and see if we can't turn this little dance into something more productive." As they prepared to engage the Ikaru on a new front, Quillen couldn't shake the feeling that they'd achieved something remarkable. They'd stood on the precipice of disaster and had managed, through some combination of insanity and ingenuity, to push back the darkness. And yet, in the back of his mind, he knew this was only the beginning. The real work was only just beginning, and while they'd managed to stave off disaster for now, the true test lay ahead. But at least, for the moment, they could count this as a win. A small victory in a universe that seemed determined to keep them in their place. A reminder that humanity, for all its flaws, still had a few tricks up its sleeve. "Eyes open, people," Quillen said, his tone a mix of weary satisfaction and renewed determination. "We've got a universe to save, and it's not going to wait around for us to catch our breath." With those words, they turned their attention back to the task at hand, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. After all, they'd come too far to let a little thing like cosmic chaos stand in their way. The control room of the makeshift ship was a symphony of dying dreams and malfunctioning tech, the kind of place you'd expect if someone decided to run a space program from their garage. Gregor sat slumped over his console, his expression more grim than the ship's misaligned gravity field. "Ah, the sweet smell of despair," he muttered, nose wrinkling at the acrid scent of burnt circuits. Leela pinched the bridge of her nose as if willing her headache to dissipate through sheer force of will. "If optimism were currency, we'd be bankrupt. Can we admit we're screwed now?" Quillen rubbed his eyes, feeling every bit of grit that had accumulated there from too many sleepless nights. "Not yet. We still have a few more bad decisions to make before we call it quits." Vexa, however, remained a beacon of unsettling cheerfulness. "Oh, come on, it's not that bad. We just need a new angle." Deacon chuckled darkly, leaning back in his chair. "Unless that angle includes divine intervention or a miracle, we're running low on options." "Miracles," Gregor scoffed. "We've hit more dead ends than a blindfolded rat in a maze." Quillen stared at the floor, flooded with doubts heavier than his spaceship's clunky hull. "We can't keep doing this. I'm out of tricks. We're bleeding resources and the team is exhausted." Vexa frowned at him, her usually upbeat demeanor faltering. "You can't be serious. We've come too far to give up." "Yeah," Leela chimed in, the sarcasm in her voice as thick as the tension in the room. "Just think of all the glorious death scenes we'd miss out on." Quillen chuckled despite himself, a forced, weary sound. "We knew it was a long shot, but even I didn't expect it to go this sideways." "Sideways," Gregor snorted. "Try upside down and on fire." Amidst the banter, Vex's console pinged with a sound that suddenly sliced through the gloom like a laser scalpel. Her eyes lit up, scanning the data that had suddenly appeared, a string of Ikaru glyphs, each one more complex than the last. "Hold on a second. What is it?" Quillen asked, curiosity piqued. Their grim reality had been so consistent, any change was as welcome as a surprise reprieve from a death sentence. Vex's fingers danced over her keyboard, a rhythm born of confidence and perhaps a hint of desperation. "We've been looking at this all wrong. Those glyphs aren't just taunting us, they are instructions." Leela peered over, her face still a portrait of skepticism. "Instructions? From a species that toy with time like it's a damn hobby." "Maybe," Vexa replied, determination in her voice. "If I'm right, it's a clue, a way to flip their little playground on its head." Deacon rolled his eyes. "Right, and I'm the Emperor of Mars. Let's be real, any misstep and we're cosmic dust." Gregor leaned forward, his expression softening from skepticism to cautious intrigue. "What's the plan then, Vexa? If you've got something worth dying for, I'm all ears." Vexa hesitated for a moment, then nodded to herself, as if making up her mind. "This piece here," she pointed at the screen, "suggests a feedback loop. If we can recalibrate our systems to match the Ikaru's frequency, we might destabilize their control long enough to make a move. Quillen crossed his arms, his voice laced with both doubt and hope. And if we fail, then we become a cautionary tale for any other poor souls who find themselves in a similar mess, Vexa replied with a wry smile. All right, let's do it, Quillen decided, waving his hand like he was banishing their doubts to the vacuum of space. We've got nothing left to lose but our already dubious reputation. Leela and Gregor shared a glance, then nodded. Deacon simply shrugged, his usual sardonic smirk in place. At least it'll be an interesting way to go. The ship rumbled ominously as they rerouted what little power they had left into Vex's plan. The console lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to mock their very existence. It was a gamble, sure, but at this point they'd settled for any odds better than certain death. Vex's fingers flew over her console, her focus absolute. Got it. Just need a few more minutes. Make them count, Quillen said, his voice firm. Or we're going to find out what becoming a black hole snack feels like. Outside, the stars seemed to shift, as if holding their breath in anticipation. Maybe they were curious too, wondering if these human anomalies could really pull off a miracle. Or perhaps just waiting for another addition to the list of failed cosmic explorers. As the minutes ticked by, the ship's sensors began to stabilize, the chaotic noise fading into something manageable, something they might actually stand a chance of understanding. Vex's plan was working, inasmuch as a near-death experience could be classified as success. There, Vexa shouted triumphantly, her face awash with exhilaration. The loops engaged, the ship's monitors flooded with data, alien code unspooling like a digital tapestry. It was beautiful in that terrifying, incomprehensible way that made you question your own ineptitude. Quillen watched, an odd mix of relief and dread settling in his chest. So, what now? Do we send them an RSVP to our own funeral? Vexa laughed, a sound of genuine joy that sounded foreign amidst the usual dirge-like atmosphere. We wait and see. With any luck, they're going to have a headache to rival Ior's. Gregor leaned back in his seat, exhaling a long sigh. Well, if we've pissed them off, at least we didn't go quietly. Quiet was never really our style, Leela agreed, allowing herself the luxury of a small, proud smile. Quillen chuckled softly, feeling the tension bleed away, replaced by a renewed sense of determination. All right, let's see what happens next. Maybe we'll get lucky. Or maybe we'll end up as the galaxy's newest debris field, Deacon quipped, ever the pessimist. The moments ticked by, each second feeling like a small eternity. But slowly a change began to take shape outside. The Ikaru ship, once a beacon of their own impending doom, flickered, its form wavering as the feedback loop took hold. Quillen leaned forward, eyes wide. It's working. Let's not start popping the champagne just yet, Leela cautioned, though her voice held a note of awe. Yeah, celebrate on dry land, Gregor added, a glimmer of the old sarcasm in his tone. Or whatever counts as dry land in this floating tin can. As the Ikaru vessel stabilized, the glyphs on their screens shifted again, forming a new pattern, a signal, an opportunity. They want to talk, Vexa announced, her voice filled with surprise. Talk, Quillen echoed, disbelief edging his words. After all this, maybe they appreciate our unique brand of improvisational chaos, Deacon suggested with a smirk, or they're impressed we're still in one piece. Quillen took a deep breath, steeling himself for what might come. Let's open a channel. Worst case, we get to hear the aliens tell us to bugger off in real time. With a few deft keystrokes, Vexa established the connection. The ship's comms crackled to life, the alien language a strange, almost musical series of tones and inflections. Quillen nodded to Vexa. You're our linguist, go ahead. Vexa leaned in, her expression one of intense concentration. This is our chance. Let's convince them not to crush us like spacefaring ants. The alien voice responded, a slow, deliberate rumble that made the ship's hull vibrate. Vexa listened intently, her face a mask of concentration as she decoded the message. They're curious. They want to know why we interfered. Tell them we have a thing for temporal paradoxes, Gregor suggested with a sly grin. Vexa rolled her eyes but sent back a carefully crafted response. Moments later, the alien voice returned, more inquisitive than threatening. "They are intrigued," Vexa said, her voice barely concealing her excitement. "They want to understand our technology, our methods." Quillen allowed himself a small, relieved laugh. "Looks like we've finally found some common ground. Or at least we're not on their hit list anymore," Leela remarked, her tone lightening. Vexa continued the dialogue, her voice and the alien tone slowly finding a rhythm. It was a tenuous connection, but it was there, a bridge across a gulf of mistrust and misunderstanding. "Keep it going," Quillen encouraged, feeling the tide turn. "This might just be the breakthrough we need." As Vexa spoke, the crew exchanged smiles, the weight of their struggle lifting, if only for a moment. They'd clawed their way back from the brink, and though the future was uncertain for now, they had hope, a fragile, flickering light that refused to be snuffed out. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Enough to face whatever the universe decided to throw their way next. Because if there was one thing Quillen knew for sure, it was that humanity had a knack for surviving impossible odds. "Let's keep this dance going," Vexa said, her smile infectious. "We've got a universe to negotiate." Quillen nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "And maybe we'll finally get to call the shots." As the ship hummed with subdued energy, the team prepared for the next phase, ready to push the boundaries of what was possible. They'd turned a potential defeat into a momentary triumph, and that was something worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, with humor, with grit, and the unshakable belief that humanity could hold its own against even the most cosmic of challenges. The ship's control room was a mess of blinking lights and tense silence, the kind of silence that might be mistaken for peace if not for the constant threat of imminent doom. "Doctor." Quillen stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, watching Vexa like a hawk watches a mouse, except this mouse was trying to outsmart a species that treated time like their personal yo-yo. "All right, Vexa, what's the next move?" Quillen asked, his voice tinged with the kind of optimism one might adopt when choosing between two equally unappetizing death sentences. Vexa, ever the optimist, tapped a few keys, her eyes scanning the glyphs with the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb defusal. "We need to match their temporal oscillations. If we can synchronize our systems to their time frequencies, it might just invert their control matrix." "Right. Easy as pie," Leela chimed in from her console, her sarcasm as thick as the recycled air. "Just like that time we tried to patch the ship's hull with duct tape and good intentions." Gregor slumped over his console with the weariness of someone who's seen the universe's ugliest sides, snorted. "Hope the Ikaru like surprises, because I'm not sure even they know what'll happen if we pull this off." Deacon chuckled darkly from his corner, the sound like gravel rolling downhill. "Remind me to update my will. If we survive, I'll leave my collection of sarcastic comebacks to the ship's AI." Quillen rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of 100 failed experiments pressing down on him. "All right, team, let's get this circus act rolling. Vexa, you take the lead. If anyone can outsmart these time-bending bastards, it's you." Vexa nodded, her fingers flying over the console as if each keystroke was a step in a delicate dance. "Just keep everything stable. One slip, and we might end up in an entirely different time zone." "Great," Gregor muttered. "I've always wanted to see the universe before coffee was invented." As the ship groaned and rumbled under the stress of the new power configurations, Quillen couldn't help but feel that gnawing doubt again. The kind that whispered in a voice not unlike his own that maybe, just maybe, they were in over their heads. "Status?" he asked, hoping for a response that wouldn't make him reconsider his life choices. "Engines are stable-ish," Leela replied, her fingers dancing across her own console, "but the gravity field's still throwing a tantrum. Feels like we're trying to balance a seesaw on a tightrope." "Perfect," Quillen said dryly. "Nothing like adding a little vertigo to our list of problems. The ship's systems blared a warning, a discordant chorus that could make a funeral dirge sound like a pop hit. Vexa winced, her hands moving faster. "We've got interference." "The Ikaru must have realized what we're up to and they're not loving it." "Can't blame them," Deacon said with a shrug. "I'd be pissed too if someone tried to crash my time-bending party." Quillen leaned over Vex's shoulder, watching the glyphs morph into new, increasingly complex patterns. "Can we counter it?" "Working on it," Vexa replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Just need to adjust the frequency." There, the ship lurched, the artificial gravity momentarily giving up the ghost, sending everyone into a brief and embarrassing hover before slamming them back down. It was like the universe's way of keeping them humble. "Next time, warn a guy," Gregor grumbled, rubbing his elbow where it had met the floor in a less-than-friendly rendezvous. "Consider it part of the charm," Leela said, not bothering to hide her amusement. Vex's console beeped loudly, the sound cutting through the tension. "Got it. We're in sync with their temporal wave." "Good," Quillen said, allowing himself a small smile. "Now let's see if we can use that to turn the tables." "You mean let them know we're not just a bunch of cosmic clowns?" Deacon asked, raising an eyebrow. "Exactly," Quillen replied. "We've got to show them that even clowns can be dangerous. Especially when they are armed with temporal feedback loops," Gregor added. The ship's sensors beeped again, signaling the Ikaru ship's attempt to reassert control. But this time, their energy was met with resistance, a tug-of-war between two vastly different understandings of time and space. Vex's eyes were locked on the screen, her focus as sharp as a blade. "They're pushing back, hard. Leela, Gregor, keep our systems steady," Quillen ordered. "We can't afford to lose our grip now." As they worked, the ship's lights flickered, the power straining under the new demands. It was like riding a roller coaster with no seat belts, and the thrill was equally matched by the danger. "We're holding," Leela reported, though her tone suggested she wouldn't place any bets on how long that would last. "Keep it that way," Quillen said, his voice firm. "Vexa, how are we doing?" She glanced up, a determined glint in her eyes. "We're not just holding them off, we're starting to inch forward." "Good. Now let's shove them off balance," Deacon suggested, his grin visible even from across the room. Vexa made another series of adjustments, her fingers a blur. The ship jolted, a sign that the Ikaru were feeling the effects of their own manipulations turned back against them. "I think they are getting the message," Vexa said, her voice tinged with triumphant satisfaction. "Either that or they are about to send us a really angry postcard," Gregor quipped. Quillen watched as the glyphs on the screen shifted again, forming a new, more coherent pattern, a conversation initiated by the Ikaru. "They're reaching out, probably to tell us to bugger off," Leela said with a shrug, "or congratulate us on the most creative suicide mission they've ever seen," Deacon added. Quillen nodded to Vexa. "Let's hear what they have to say." Vexa activated the communication link, her voice steady as she responded to the alien transmission. The Ikaru language, a series of musical notes and guttural sounds, filled the control room once more. "They're offering a ceasefire," Vexa translated, her surprise evident. "They want to know how we did it." "Should we tell them?" Leela asked, eyebrow arched with skepticism. Quillen considered it, then nodded. "We'll give them just enough to keep them curious without handing over the keys to the kingdom." Vexa crafted a careful reply, balancing honesty with discretion. Moments later, the Ikaru response came, a tone that even in its alien cadence sounded impressed. "They want to negotiate," Vexa said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Negotiate," Gregor echoed. "Didn't think we were that charming. Guess they like a little chaos," Deacon suggested, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smirk. Quillen allowed himself a moment to relish the unexpected turn. "If we can keep them talking, we might just walk out of this. Or float out, as the case may be," Leela added. The ship settled into a tense equilibrium, the power fluctuations smoothing out as the feedback loop began to stabilize. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Keep the connection open," Quillen instructed. "We need to maintain this advantage." Vexa nodded, continuing the dialogue with the Ikaru, her voice measured and controlled. It was a delicate dance. One wrong step and they could find themselves back at square one. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a cautious optimism. The kind of optimism that seasoned soldiers feel when the enemy's guns fall silent, but the war isn't quite over. "So, what's the plan?" Gregor asked, breaking the silence. "We just keep chatting until they're bored enough to leave us alone." Quillen thought about it, the weight of command settling on his shoulders like an old, familiar coat. "We need to find a way to turn this temporary advantage into something more permanent. Maybe convince them we're not worth the hassle," Deacon suggested. "Or that we've got more tricks up our sleeves," Vexa added, her fingers still dancing over the console. "Whatever it is, we need to be ready for anything," Quillen said, determination hardening his voice. The Ikaru might seem curious now, but that could change in a heartbeat. The team nodded, understanding the stakes even if they were shrouded in uncertainty. They'd survived this long against odds that would have flattened anyone else, and they weren't about to give up now. "Let's keep pushing," Quillen urged, his voice a mixture of resolve and what might have been hope if it weren't so damn cynical. "We've got a slim chance here, and that's more than we've had in a long time." "Agreed," Leela said, her eyes meeting his with a shared understanding. "Let's show these time-benders what we're made of." And as the ship sailed through the uncertain void, its crew ready for whatever came next, they knew one thing for sure. They were out of their depth, but they were still kicking. And sometimes that was enough to turn the tide. The control room was a mess of blinking lights and tense silence, with the air thick as if someone had squeezed the life out of a dozen stress balls and let the anxiety seep into the walls. Quillen leaned over Vex's shoulder, his eyes tracking the evolving glyphs on her console. They were in deep now, a showdown with the Ikaru that had more potential for cosmic disaster than a toddler with a nuke. "Looks like the Ikaru are growing restless," Vexa observed, her fingers a blur as she worked the console like a virtuoso might a piano. Only this wasn't a recital, more like a mad scramble to keep them from getting wiped off the cosmic map. "Good," Leela chimed in, raising an eyebrow. "Means we're irritating them. Glad to know our persistent incompetence finally pays off," Gregor said, adjusting a dial that probably didn't want to be adjusted. "Let's not get too sentimental," Deacon added from his corner, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too many bad movies where the heroes always won. "This ain't over till the fat lady sings, and last I checked, the universe can't carry a tune." Quillen rubbed his eyes, the weight of failed experiments and sleepless nights pressing down on him like a leaden cloak. "Vexa, how are we doing on that paradox theory?" She glanced up, her face a mask of concentration. "If we can match the temporal oscillations precisely, we might trick the Ikaru into a loop. They won't know if they're coming or going. Just like us most days," Gregor muttered, earning a chuckle from Leela. "Except this time we've got a plan," Quillen said, more to reassure himself than anyone else. "All we need is a little luck." "I'll add Lucky Rabbit's foot to our list of supplies," Deacon remarked dryly. "Right next to sanity and common sense." The Ikaru's interference grew more aggressive, like a drunk trying to fight his reflection. The ship lurched again, and Quillen swore he saw the ghost of a smile on Vexa's lips. "Don't get too cocky, Vexa," Leela warned. "Last time we smiled at something, it blew up in our faces." "Yeah," Gregor agreed. "Though that was mostly Deacon's fault. You try mixing alien tech with a hangover," Deacon shot back, not missing a beat. Vexa's fingers danced over the console, the temporal data flowing like a tide she was trying to ride without a board. "We're closing in. Just a few more adjustments. Let's hope the Ikaru have a thing for déjà vu," Quillen said, his fingers crossed metaphorically since literally would have meant he wasn't doing his job. The console beeped insistently and Vexa gave a small, triumphant nod. "Got it. Frequencies are aligned." "All right, everyone," Quillen announced, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Time to make these time-bending bastards regret messing with us." As if in response, the ship shuddered. the power flickering like a candle in a hurricane. The gravity field hiccuped, and they all found themselves briefly weightless before slamming back to the floor. "Feel like we're in a bad sci-fi movie," Leela grumbled, picking herself up. "The kind that doesn't even make it to video," Gregor suggested. "Exactly." Vex's console lit up with new patterns, the Ikaru ship systems responding to the feedback loop, an intricate dance of cause and effect, looping endlessly. "They're caught in it," Vexa confirmed, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and triumph. "And so it begins," Deacon said, his tone matching the ominous vibe of someone who had decided to press the big red button just to see what would happen. "How long until they realize?" Quillen asked. "With any luck, never," Vexa replied. "Luck," Gregor echoed. "The one thing we've been running on fumes of." The ship settled into a strained calm, the Ikaru's aggressive interference turning into an odd sort of equilibrium. But Quillen knew better than to trust it. Calm on this ship was like silence in a horror movie, a bad sign. "So what now?" Gregor asked, breaking the uneasy silence. "We keep them in the loop as long as we can," Quillen answered. "They'll either get tired of chasing their own tails or, Leela prodded. "Or we'll have to come up with Plan B," Quillen admitted. "Plan B?" Deacon asked, incredulous. "I didn't know we had a Plan B." "We don't," Quillen said with a shrug. "But it sounds better than we're screwed." Vex's console beeped again. The Ikaru's attempts to break free of their temporal chains were as futile as a cat trying to catch its own tail. For now, they were stuck, and with any luck, they'd stay that way long enough for the team to regroup. "Feels like we just hit pause on the universe," Gregor mused, his fingers absently tracing patterns on his console. "Yeah, but if we hit play too soon, we'll be right back where we started," Vexa cautioned. "Which wasn't exactly paradise," Leela noted. "More like the opposite," Deacon added. "Whatever that is." Quillen watched the glyphs continue their looping dance, the situation surreal in its absurdity. It wasn't often you trapped an alien species that treated time like a cheap parlor trick. It was the kind of story you told to get free drinks, assuming you survived to tell it. "Just keep it steady," Quillen instructed. "The longer we hold them, the better our chances." "And how do we know when it's safe?" Gregor asked. "When it feels like we're not about to become cosmic roadkill," Quillen replied. They worked in tense silence, the only sound the hum of the ship and the occasional beep from Vex's console. Time passed, or looped, uncertainly, the minutes stretching into an indeterminate haze. "Anyone else feel like we're sitting on a bomb with a really long fuse?" Leela asked. "More like a bomb that's already gone off," Deacon replied. "And we're just waiting to see if we got the universe's middle finger as a souvenir." Eventually, the Ikaru's attempts to break free grew weaker, the paradox holding them in a temporal limbo that felt as precarious as it did ingenious. The team held their collective breath, unsure if they were witnessing victory or merely the eye of the storm. "Looks like they're settling in for the long haul," Vexa observed, her tone a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Let's not pop the champagne just yet," Quillen cautioned. "We've got a long way to go before we're out of the woods." "But it's a step," Gregor said, trying to sound hopeful despite everything. "A step in the right direction," Leela agreed, though her expression suggested she was waiting for the proverbial other shoe to drop. Quillen nodded, feeling a strange sense of kinship with the team, misfits, cynics, and survivors, every last one of them. Together they'd faced the impossible, laughed in the face of doom, and somehow managed not to screw it all up. "All right," he said, allowing himself a small, wary smile. "Let's see if we can't turn this mess into something that resembles a win." As the ship drifted through the uncertain void, the team ready for whatever came next, they knew one thing for sure. They were out of their depth, but they were still kicking. And sometimes, in a universe that seemed determined to trip them up at every turn, that was all you could ask for. "Anyone want to bet against us making it out of here?" Deacon offered, grinning like a man who'd found himself at the winning end of a wicked joke. "Not a chance," Gregor replied, shaking his head. "I'm keeping my money on us." "And here I thought we were all out of miracles," Leela said, glancing around at the crew that had somehow pulled off the impossible. We might be, Quillen admitted, but it turns out we're pretty good at making our own luck. Vex's console pinged softly, the glyphs settling into a rhythm that suggested the Ikaru had, for the moment, accepted their fate. They'd be back, no doubt, but for now, human ingenuity had won the day. Here's to clowns with temporal feedback loops, Gregor toasted, lifting an imaginary glass. To cosmic chaos and sticking it to time-bending bastards, Deacon added, raising his own invisible drink. And to us, Quillen concluded, his voice steady with a confidence he hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. For proving, once again, that sometimes the universe's greatest punchline is us. And with that, they settled into a newfound, if temporary, peace, a respite in a universe where nothing was ever truly certain, except for the knowledge that, for now, they'd managed to turn the tide against all odds. Vexa leaned back in her chair, eyes glazed but victorious, the console's patterns reflecting off her face like a low-tech disco ball. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, "that was a hell of a ride." Gregor snorted, leaning against the wall with the nonchalance of a man who'd only just avoided cosmic obliteration. Ride. More like a poorly planned road trip through time's worst neighborhood, with a busted GPS, Leela added, rubbing her temples, and a car that smells like wet dog. Don't forget the flat tire, Deacon quipped, his grin a shade too close to maniacal. Can't leave that out. Quillen surveyed his crew, the ragtag remnants of what was once probably a respectable team. All right, enough with the metaphors. Let's focus on what we actually achieved, shall we? Vexa tapped a few keys, her fingers moving with the kind of precision that only came after weeks of caffeine-fueled terror. The Ikaru are in stasis for now, but we can't keep them there indefinitely. Not unless we plan on making this loop our new vacation home, Gregor said, raising an eyebrow. Pass. I've seen enough of this place to last me a lifetime, Leela replied. Yeah, well, at least the rent's cheap, Deacon shrugged, though the shadow of a smile betrayed his relief. Quillen nodded, his mind already racing to the next steps. The immediate danger's past, but the bigger picture hasn't changed. Earth's still a mess with the terraforming tech on the fritz, speaking of which, Leela said, glancing at a nearby monitor displaying fluctuating atmospheric data from Earth. Any chance our little time trick helped with that? Vexa checked a readout, her expression shifting from curious to bemused. The Ikaru's meddling got caught in the loop too. The interference with Earth's climate is leveling out. Well, paint me green and call me a Martian, Gregor muttered. We might have accidentally fixed something. Accidentally or not, it's good news, Quillen said, trying to suppress the flicker of hope that dared to emerge. With the Ikaru out of the way, Earth might have a fighting chance. Deacon leaned back, letting out a long breath. So, what's next? We pack up, head home, and pretend this never happened. Not quite, Quillen replied. We've still got a mess to clean up on Earth, remember, and the Ikaru won't stay looped forever. Right. The universe never lets us off easy, does it? Leela said, half smiling like someone who'd survived a shipwreck only to find themselves on a pirate-infested island. Nope, Vexa agreed. But maybe, just maybe, we've bought enough time to get ahead of the game. Wouldn't that be a first? Gregor said dryly, earning a collective chuckle from the crew. Quillen rubbed his eyes, the weight of the last few days pressing down like a wayward asteroid. Let's debrief, figure out what we've learned, and see if we can't turn this temporary victory into something more permanent. Sounds like a plan, Deacon agreed. Though knowing us, it'll probably involve a lot more improvisation and a bit less plan. Wouldn't have it any other way, Vexa added, her gaze drifting back to the console where the Ikaru glyphs twinkled like cryptic stars. The team fell into an easy silence, the kind only shared by those who'd stared death in the face and come away with nothing more than a few fresh scars and a good story. Anyone else feel like we've just been through the universe's most dysfunctional team-building exercise? Leela asked, breaking the quiet. Yeah, Gregor replied, his tone mock-serious. And I think we all learned something very important today. What's that? Vexa asked, amused. That we're all terrible at team-building exercises, he deadpanned, and for a moment the tension eased, laughter echoing through the control room. Quillen let out a breath, feeling a little lighter than before. All right, everyone. Let's see what we can salvage from this disaster. As they began their work, the hum of the ship settled into a comforting rhythm, the uncertainty of the past few hours giving way to a cautious optimism. They'd survived this round, and with any luck, they'd be ready for whatever came next. Feels weird, Vexa mused, more to herself than anyone else. Being on the other side of it all. What's weird is that we actually managed to do it, Gregor replied, not looking up from his work. The universe must be having an off day, Deacon said, shaking his head. And let's hope it stays that way, Leela added, her voice filled with a warmth that hadn't been there before. The team worked on, the atmosphere in the control room shifting from tense to something resembling hopeful. They'd been through hell and back, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they were moving forward. Quillen watched them, feeling a strange sense of pride. All right, people, let's get to it. The universe won't wait forever, and I'd like to get this mess sorted before it changes its mind. As if it ever lets us forget, Gregor said with a wry smile. And yet here we are, Leela replied. Still standing, still fighting, and still unapologetically human. Is there any other way to be? Vexa asked, the hint of a challenge in her voice. Not a chance, Quillen agreed. Let's finish this. As they set to work, the future uncertain but somehow brighter, the team knew one thing for sure. They'd been tested, pushed to their limits, and they'd come out the other side with a renewed sense of purpose, all thanks to a little ingenuity, a lot of luck, and the undeniable human spirit that refused to give up. The universe might have its wicked sense of humor, but they'd learned to laugh right back, and for now that was enough. Some time later, as the team gathered around the central console, Quillen addressed them with the kind of authority that only came from surviving a near catastrophe. So, here's the deal. Earth's terraforming is back on track, but we can't leave anything to chance. Chance, Gregor echoed. I thought chance was our best friend. More like an annoying relative who pops up at the worst times, Deacon quipped. True, Quillen conceded, but we need to be proactive. No more waiting for fate to throw us a bone. Leela nodded, her expression thoughtful. So what do? We can't just keep the Ikaru on pause forever. No, we can't, Vexa agreed. But we can learn from this. Maybe even turn it to our advantage. Advantage? Against a species that plays with time like it's their personal toy, Gregor asked, skeptical but intrigued. Exactly, Quillen replied. If we can understand their tech, we might be able to replicate it or at least defend against it. Or use it, Vexa added, her voice filled with cautious optimism. Use it? Deacon asked, the idea both enticing and terrifying. Imagine the possibilities, Leela said, her eyes wide with the prospects. We could stabilize Earth's climate, maybe even reverse some of the damage. Or visit the past, see what really happened to the dinosaurs, Gregor joked, though there was a hint of seriousness beneath his words. Ah yes, because nothing says scientific endeavor like confusing a T-Rex, Deacon deadpanned. Quillen raised a hand, drawing the group's attention back. Focus, people, this could be the start of something big. Earth's got a second chance and we might just be able to make it count. Assuming we don't screw it up, Gregor pointed out, a master of grim realism. Let's not, Vexa said, her tone light but firm. We've got an opportunity here and I'd rather not waste it. Agreed, Quillen said, glancing around at his crew, each one battered, bruised, but unbroken. Let's show the universe what we're really made of. The team exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They'd been through the ringer, but somehow they'd come out stronger on the other side. The Ikaru might have underestimated them, but they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. With a newfound sense of purpose, they turned back to their consoles, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. There would be obstacles, sure, but they'd faced worse and survived. In a universe that thrived on chaos and uncertainty, they were determined to carve out a future that was unequivocally their own. To the future, Quillen said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. To the future, the team echoed, each voice filled with hope and defiance. And so, in the tiny, makeshift ship that had become their home, they began to lay the groundwork for humanity's next chapter, one filled with promise, potential, and the ever-present possibility of turning the tables on fate once and for all. The universe might have its jokes, but they'd learn to laugh right back, proving that sometimes the last laugh truly belonged to those who dared to dream.